and we'll keep drifting, floating together through the right-handed mysteries, looping softly, endlessly through the night. Tonight we'll drift through the violent prehistoric battles that favored right-hand dominance, the genetic twists in brain development that tilt us rightward, and the rare advantages that keep left-handers in the evolutionary game. There's nothing you need to do now. Just let your body sink. Heavier, heavier. Feel the mattress holding you, every muscle softening, your heartbeat slowing, thump, thump, matching the rhythm of space itself, shoulders melting down, jaw releasing, each breath pulling you deeper, deeper into the calm, the quiet, the dark. If this helps you rest, tap subscribe, comment, and hit like, so others can find this calm too. But only if your eyes are still open, otherwise, just drift. Now, let's drift into how humans became mostly right-handed. Close your eyes now, and let the story carry you. Somewhere, deep in the long quiet of the Earth's memory before cities rose, before writing scratched its first marks into clay, before anything we might call civilization drew its first breath, there was a hand, a single ancient hand reaching through the dark, and for reasons that took millions of years to unfold, that hand began to lean, just slightly, to the right. It is a mystery as old as the species itself, this quiet tilt toward one side. Nearly every human being alive on this planet today, somewhere around 90 to 93% of us, favors the right hand. We grip our pens with it. We shake with it. We reach for the things we love with it. And yet, for all its familiarity, the reason why, the deep, ancient reason why, is still being slowly, gently revealed. Let yourself settle now. Feel the weight of your body pressing softly into the bed. Each breath a little longer than the last. The story begins not with humans at all, but with something far older. Something that stirred in the earliest ancestors of all primates, long before the first hominin stood upright on the African savanna. Lateralization, the tendency for one side of the brain or body to do something differently from the other, is not unique to us. It stretches back hundreds of millions of years, woven into the very fabric of animal life. Fish show it, birds show it. Even insects in their own quiet way show a preference for one side over another. Lateralization, it seems, is one of the oldest patterns the living world has ever written. But in humans, it became something extraordinary, something almost universal. And that universality, that remarkable consistency across every continent, every culture, every era of human history, is what makes the story of right-handedness so compelling. It is not a cultural invention. It is not something we learned or were taught. It is something that was built into us quietly over an almost incomprehensible span of time. Let your jaw release. Let your tongue rest softly. Thump, thump. The rhythm continues, steady and slow. Among the great apes, our closest living relatives, handedness exists, but it is far less pronounced than it is in us. Chimpanzees show a mild preference, sometimes leaning slightly right, sometimes slightly left, and the balance between the two is much closer to 50-50 than what we see in human populations. This tells us something important. The strong rightward tilt that characterizes our species did not simply appear overnight. It developed gradually, shaped by forces that were specific to the human lineage. Forces tied to the way we learn to walk, the way we learn to speak, and the way we learn to fight. The genus Homo, the broad family to which we belong, appears to have carried a rightward bias for a very long time. Some researchers believe that the preference for the right hand may be an ancient attribute of this genus, stretching back at least 500,000 years, possibly longer. The evidence for this comes not from bones or fossils in the way you might expect, but from the tools our ancestors left behind and from the marks they left on their own teeth. Breathe in slowly, and as you breathe out, let your shoulders drop a little lower, a little softer. Imagine, if you can, a hominin sitting by a fire at the edge of a riverbed, hundreds of thousands of years ago. In one hand, the right hand most likely, they hold a stone, a flat, carefully chosen stone, and with a strike of another stone in the other hand, they begin to shape it. Napping, this process is called. It is the art of striking flakes from a core of rock to create a sharp edge, and the angle at which these flakes fall, the pattern they leave behind, these are like fingerprints. They can tell us, even after 500,000 years, which hand held the tool and which hand delivered the blow. At sites across Africa and Europe, archaeologists have studied these ancient stone tools and found a consistent pattern. The flakes fall in ways that suggest right-handed nappers. At Kubifora in Kenya, where evidence of Homo habilis tool-making survives from over 1,000,000 years ago, the stone tools themselves whisper of right-handed hands shaping them. The bias is subtle but persistent, a quiet echo of the preference that was already taking root in the minds and bodies of our earliest tool-using ancestors. And at Boxgrove in England, a site dating to roughly 500,000 years before the present, researchers found something remarkable. Among the predominantly right-handed evidence, there were signs of left-handed nappers as well, a small minority, but present. Even then, even 500,000 years ago, left-handedness was not absent. It was simply rare. Let yourself drift now. The words are just a current carrying you gently. You don't need to hold on to any of them. Just let them pass. The tools tell one part of the story, but there is another source of evidence, stranger and more intimate, that helps us understand handedness in our deep past. It comes from teeth, specifically from the scratches on the teeth of Neanderthals, our closest extinct relatives, beings who walked the earth alongside early modern humans for thousands of years before disappearing. When a person eats, when they chew and tear and bite, the way they hold food in their mouth creates tiny scratches on the surfaces of their teeth. And if a person tends to hold objects, food, or perhaps a piece of worked leather, or a strip of sinew, in one hand while bringing it to their mouth, the angle of those scratches shifts in a predictable way. By studying these tooth striations under magnification, researchers have been able to infer, with reasonable confidence, which hand Neanderthals preferred. The results are striking. The pattern of scratches on Neanderthal teeth suggests a predominantly right-handed population, though with some left-handed individuals present. This means that the rightward bias did not belong only to our direct ancestors. It was shared, independently or through common ancestry, with the Neanderthals as well. Handedness, it seems, was not a quirk of one lineage. It was a feature of the broader human story, written into multiple branches of the family tree. Thump, thump. Feel your heartbeat slow and steady like a drum deep underground. Now let us turn from the ancient past to something far more intimate, something happening right now, inside bodies that have not yet drawn their first breath. Because the question of where handedness comes from does not begin at birth. It begins before birth, in the quiet darkness of the womb, in the slow and mysterious process by which a developing human body decides which side will be which. Fetuses begin to show preferences remarkably early. By around 18 weeks of development, long before birth, a fetus will begin to show a tendency to suck its thumb, and more often than not it will reach for the right thumb. Ultrasound studies have captured this behavior repeatedly, watching tiny hands curl toward tiny mouths, and the bias toward the right side appears even at this early stage. The brain, it seems, begins organizing itself long before the body is finished being built. But this prenatal preference is not yet fully determined. It is more like a gentle lean, a probabilistic nudge in one direction. The final expression of handedness, the strong lifelong preference that most of us carry, is the result of a collaboration between genetics, the environment of the womb, and the experiences of early life. It is not a single switch being flipped. It is more like a symphony, with many instruments contributing to the final sound. Let your fingers uncurl now. Let your hands rest, open and heavy, on the bed beside you. The genetics of handedness are surprisingly complex. For a long time, researchers believed that handedness might be controlled by a single gene, following a simple pattern of inheritance. One version of the gene would produce right-handedness, and another would produce left-handedness, with one version dominant over the other. This is the kind of clean, elegant model that is satisfying to imagine. But the reality, as genetics so often reveals, is messier and more interesting than that. Modern research, drawing on enormous databases of genetic information from hundreds of thousands of people, has identified up to 40 different genes that appear to play some role in shaping handedness. No single gene determines the outcome on its own. Instead, each gene contributes a small piece of the puzzle, and it is the combined effect of all of them, interacting with one another and with the environment, that tips the balance toward right or left. Among these genes, certain ones have drawn particular attention. NME7 is one such gene, linked to the way cells organize their internal structures. structures called microtubules, which play a role in how the brain develops and how its two hemispheres come to differ from one another. When NME7 is disrupted in animal models, the normal asymmetry of the brain is altered. This suggests that the very foundations of brain lateralization, the process by which the left and right sides of the brain come to specialize in different tasks, may be connected at a cellular level to the same molecular machinery that influences handedness. Breathe. Just breathe. Each exhale a little longer, a little softer than the one before. And there is something even more fundamental at work, something happening at the very beginning of life before genes have fully begun their work. In the earliest stages of embryonic development, before the brain has formed, before the nervous system has begun to wire itself, individual cells are already showing a kind of chirality, a built-in asymmetry at the molecular level. The cytoskeleton, the internal framework of each cell, has a subtle twist to it, a handedness built into its very structure. This cellular chirality is thought to play a role in establishing the initial left-right axis of the developing embryo. It is one of the deepest roots of asymmetry in the biological world, and it may be one of the reasons why lateralization is so widespread across the animal kingdom. The universe, it turns out, has a preference for asymmetry, built into the smallest structures of life itself. But genetics and cellular architecture are not the whole story. Random fluctuations also play a role. During the early development of the brain, small stochastic variations in how neurons connect and how molecular signals spread can tip the balance in one direction or another. These fluctuations are not determined by genes. They are, in a sense, noise, the gentle randomness of biological processes, and yet combined with the genetic predisposition toward right-handedness, they help shape the final outcome in each individual. Epigenetic markers too contribute to the picture. These are chemical modifications to the DNA itself, not changes to the genetic code, but tags that influence whether certain genes are turned on or off. Some researchers have found differences in epigenetic patterns between left-handed and right-handed individuals, suggesting that the environment, including the environment inside the womb, can leave its mark on the expression of handedness genes. It is another thread in the tapestry, another voice in the symphony. Let your eyelids grow heavy, heavier. The darkness behind them is warm and safe. Now let us step back once more into the deep past and consider a question that has fascinated evolutionary biologists for decades. If right-handedness is so overwhelmingly dominant, if nearly every human being on Earth favors the right hand, then why does left-handedness persist at all? Why has it not simply disappeared over the course of millions of years of natural selection? The answer to this question is one of the most elegant in all of evolutionary biology, and it involves a concept called frequency-dependent selection. In simple terms, this means that the fitness value of a trait, the degree to which it helps an individual survive and reproduce, depends on how common that trait is in the population. A trait that is rare can sometimes have advantages precisely because it is rare. Left-handedness in this framework is maintained not despite being a minority trait, but in some ways because of it. And the clearest evidence for this comes from the world of combat. Thump, thump, slow and deep, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Consider two fighters facing one another. If both are right-handed, each is accustomed to defending against attacks coming from a particular angle, the angle at which a right-handed opponent would strike. They have practiced against right-handed opponents their entire lives. Their reflexes, their muscle memory, their instincts, all of these have been shaped by repeated encounters with the right-handed majority. Now imagine that one of those fighters is left-handed. Suddenly, the attacks are coming from an unfamiliar direction. The right-handed fighter's practiced defenses are less effective. The left-handed fighter, on the other hand, has spent their life fighting against right-handed opponents, the majority, and has become skilled at reading and countering right-handed attacks. The asymmetry of experience gives the left-handed fighter an advantage, a surprise that the right-handed fighter is not fully prepared for. This is the core of what is sometimes called the fighting hypothesis of handedness. It proposes that left-handedness has been maintained in human populations not because it confers some broad biological advantage, but because it provides a specific tactical edge in one-on-one combat. And the evidence supporting this idea is compelling. In sports that involve direct physical confrontation, fencing, boxing, wrestling, and other combat disciplines, left-handed athletes are significantly overrepresented compared to their share of the general population. They win at rates that far exceed what their numbers alone would predict. Let your body sink a little deeper. The mattress is holding you, cradling you. There is nothing to resist. But the fighting hypothesis, as powerful as it is, raises a question of its own. If left-handedness gives an advantage in combat, why hasn't it become more common? Why hasn't natural selection driven left-handedness to 50% or higher to eliminate the very rarity that gives it its edge? The answer lies in a delicate balance. Left-handedness provides an advantage in combat, yes, but combat is only one part of life. In cooperative activities, in working together, in coordinating with others, in the many tasks that require two people to interact smoothly, there can be a cost to being different from the majority. A left-handed person in a predominantly right-handed world may face small but persistent disadvantages in coordination, in the sharing of tools, in the subtle dance of social interaction. This balance, the advantage in combat weighed against the disadvantages in cooperation, is what keeps left-handedness at its current level, somewhere between 8 and 15% of the population, depending on the culture and the era. It is an equilibrium maintained not by any single force, but by the push and pull of multiple pressures acting simultaneously. And there is something else to consider. The fighting hypothesis has been refined over the years. An earlier version of the idea suggested that left-handedness might carry significant health costs, that it might be a marker of developmental stress or abnormal brain development. But more recent research has largely put this concern to rest. Studies examining large populations have found no significant health disadvantages associated with left-handedness. Left-handed people do not on average live shorter lives or suffer more illness than right-handed people. The trait, it seems, is neutral or even slightly beneficial in overall health terms, and its maintenance in the population can be explained without invoking pathology. Breathe out. Let the air leave your lungs slowly, like smoke dissolving into the dark. There is another dimension to the combat advantage that deserves a moment of quiet attention. When two fighters face one another, each one's body naturally orients in a way that protects the vital organs. The heart, tucked slightly to the left side of the chest, is shielded by the leading arm and the torso. For a right-handed fighter, this means leading with the left arm, which places the left side of the body forward, and the heart, with it, slightly more protected. But a left-handed fighter reverses this orientation. They lead with the right arm, and the heart is now on the side that faces the opponent. This might seem like a disadvantage, but in practice, the surprise and unfamiliarity that a left-handed fighter brings to the encounter can more than compensate for any slight increase in vulnerability. The rarity itself is the shield. This interplay between weapon grip, body orientation, and the vulnerability of the thorax is one of the subtler threads in the tapestry of handedness evolution. It suggests that the evolution of hand preference was not shaped by a single, simple force, but by a web of pressures, some physical, some social, some deeply strategic, all acting at once. Let your thoughts dissolve now, like sugar stirred into warm water. There is no need to hold on to anything. The proportion of left-handed people in human populations has remained remarkably stable over very long periods of time. Across different cultures, across different eras of history, the percentage hovers in a narrow range. This stability is itself a piece of evidence. It suggests that the forces maintaining left-handedness, the balance between combat advantage and cooperative disadvantage, have been operating for a very long time, and that they have reached a kind of equilibrium that does not shift easily. There are, however, some variations. In societies where left-handedness has been actively suppressed, where children have been discouraged or even punished for using the left hand, the reported rate of left-handedness drops noticeably. In some cultures, particularly in parts of East Asia and the Middle East during certain historical periods, the social pressure against left-handedness was strong enough to push the visible rate down to as low as 3 or 4%. But this suppression does not eliminate the underlying genetic tendency. It merely drives it underground, forcing left-handed individuals to learn to use their right hand in public, while retaining their natural preference in private. In societies where no such suppression exists, where left-handedness is accepted without stigma, the rate tends to settle closer to 10 to 12%. And in recent decades, as cultural attitudes toward left-handedness have softened in many parts of the world, the reported rate has risen slightly. Not because more people are being born left-handed, but because more people feel safe enough to express it. Thump, thump, steady, ancient, unhurried. Now, let us turn to the brain itself, to the remarkable organ that sits at the center of this story, organizing and directing the movements of our hands with extraordinary precision. The human brain is not symmetrical. Its two hemispheres, the left and the right, are mirror images of one another in broad shape, but they differ profoundly in function. The left hemisphere, in most right-handed people, is specialized for language, for logical reasoning, for sequential processing. The right hemisphere tends to handle spatial awareness, creativity, and the processing of visual and emotional information. This lateralization of brain function is deeply connected to handedness, though the connection is not as simple as popular culture sometimes suggests. It is not true that right-handed people are left-brained, and left-handed people are right-brained in any meaningful sense. The old idea that each hemisphere dominates personality or thinking style has been largely debunked. What is true is that the way the brain organizes its functions across its two hemispheres is related to, and in some cases influenced by, the same developmental processes that shape hand preference. Language lateralization, the tendency for language to be processed primarily in one hemisphere, is strongly correlated with handedness, but not perfectly. About 95% of right-handed people have language lateralized to the left hemisphere. Among left-handed people, the picture is more varied. Roughly 70% still have left hemisphere language dominance, while the remaining 30% show either right hemisphere dominance or more bilateral processing. This variation suggests that the genetic and developmental pathways that shape handedness and language lateralization overlap significantly, but are not identical. Let your eyelids fall. There is nothing to see in the dark but comfort. The cerebral hemispheres did not evolve to be mirror images with identical roles. There are deep evolutionary reasons why the brain came to specialize. One compelling idea is that specialization allows the brain to handle multiple tasks simultaneously without interference. If both hemispheres tried to perform the same function at the same time, they might conflict with one another, slowing down processing and reducing efficiency. By dividing labor, sending routine, well-practiced tasks to one hemisphere and novel, unexpected challenges to the other, the brain can multitask more effectively. This division of labor extends beyond language and spatial processing. The right hemisphere in many people is more alert to threats and unexpected stimuli, more tuned to the detection of predators, for instance, or to sudden changes in the environment. The left hemisphere, meanwhile, handles the more routine, predictable aspects of daily life, the familiar sequences of action that make up so much of what we do. This asymmetry may have been shaped by the pressures of survival on the African savanna, where the ability to simultaneously monitor the environment for danger and carry out complex goal-directed activities was essential. And handedness, in this framework, is not incidental to brain lateralization. It is one of its most visible expressions. The right hand is controlled primarily by the left hemisphere, the hemisphere that, in most people, handles language and sequential action. The fact that most humans favor the right hand may be in part a consequence of the left hemisphere's role in organizing complex, skilled movements and its deep connection to the language systems that allow us to plan and coordinate action. Breathe in and out, each breath a little shallower, a little quieter than the last. There is a theory, sometimes called the Homo loquens hypothesis, that proposes a direct link between the evolution of language and the evolution of right-handedness. The idea is this: as our ancestors developed the capacity for language, the brain began to lateralize that capacity, typically to the left hemisphere. And as the left hemisphere became dominant for language, it also became dominant for the fine motor control of the hand, particularly the right hand which it controls. The evolution of speech, in this view, dragged the evolution of right-handedness along with it, like a current pulling a leaf downstream. This is a seductive idea, and there is some evidence to support it. The regions of the brain involved in language production, particularly Broca's area in the left hemisphere, are close to the regions that control the fine movements of the hand and fingers. And there is growing evidence that language and gesture evolved together, that the first forms of human communication may have been as much about the movements of the hands as about the sounds of the voice. But the connection between language and handedness is not the whole story, and some researchers argue that it cannot be. After all, the evidence from ancient tools and Neanderthal teeth suggests that right-handed bias may predate the emergence of fully modern language by hundreds of thousands of years. If right-handedness was already established before language became complex, then language lateralization cannot be its primary cause. It may have reinforced and stabilized the rightward bias, but it likely did not create it from scratch. Let yourself float now, lighter, as though the bed beneath you has become water, and you are drifting on its surface, held up by nothing but warmth. The question of why primates, and humans in particular, developed a preference for one hand over the other has been approached from many angles. One of the oldest and most enduring hypotheses is called the postural origins hypothesis. It proposes that handedness in primates can be traced back to the way their bodies were oriented in relation to the ground and the trees. In arboreal primates, those that spend most of their time in the branches of trees, the body must maintain a stable grip on the branch with one hand while the other hand reaches out to grab food or manipulate objects. The hand that holds on is the anchor. The hand that reaches is the tool. And the choice of which hand plays which role may have been influenced by the way the body naturally orients itself in three-dimensional space. Some researchers, notably Peter McNeiledge, have proposed that certain small primates, galagos or bush babies, which are among the most primitive living primates, may serve as a model for understanding how handedness first emerged. Galagos show a slight left-hand dominance in certain tasks, and McNeiledge has suggested that this left-handed tendency in early primates may have been the ancestral state, the starting point from which the later rightward shift in humans and other great apes developed. Thump, thump, slow, rhythmic, ancient. The postural origins hypothesis has been debated and refined over many years. Some researchers have found evidence that supports it, while others have pointed out contradictions or alternative explanations. The relationship between arboreal lifestyle and handedness is not as clean or simple as the hypothesis initially suggested. Terrestrial primates, those that spend most of their time on the ground, tend to show a rightward bias, while arboreal primates show more variable or leftward tendencies. But the reasons for this pattern are not fully understood, and the evidence from different primate species does not always point in the same direction. What does seem clear is that the transition from arboreal to terrestrial life, which occurred at some point in the evolutionary history of the great apes and early hominins, may have played a role in shifting the balance toward right-handedness. When a primate moves from the branches to the ground, the demands on its hands change. The need for a stable grip on a branch is replaced by the need for precise manipulation of objects, food, tools, and eventually weapons. And this shift in demand may have favored the development of a more consistent right-handed preference. The story of bipedalism, of walking upright on two legs, adds another layer to this picture. When our ancestors began to walk on two legs, their hands were freed from the task of supporting the body's weight. For the first time, the hands could be devoted entirely to manipulation, to tool use, to communication. And as the hands took on these new roles, the brain began to specialize more strongly, dedicating one hemisphere more fully to the complex, skilled movements that the freed hands could now perform. Let your arms grow heavy. Let them rest where they are, warm and still. The story we have been drifting through tonight is not a single thread, but a braid. Many strands woven together over millions of years. There is the strand of genetics with its 40 or more genes quietly influencing the outcome. There is the strand of brain development with its molecular fluctuations and its epigenetic markings. There is the strand of combat with its frequency-dependent selection and its delicate balance of advantage and cost. There is the strand of tool use, preserved in the flakes of ancient stone, and there is the strand of language, pulling the right hand toward dominance as the left hemisphere took on the burden of speech. Each of these strands is real. Each contributes something to the final pattern, and yet none of them alone can account for the full picture. The story of how humans became mostly right-handed is not a story with a single cause. It is a story about the slow, patient accumulation of many small pressures, each one nudging the balance a little further in one direction, over a span of time so vast that it is almost impossible to truly comprehend. Breathe in, hold it just for a moment, and let it go. And so the right hand became the hand of action, the hand of precision, the hand that reached for the world. But the left hand did not disappear. It persisted, quiet and rare, carrying its own ancient advantages, its own quiet power. The balance between the two, the 90% and the 10, is not a fixed and final thing. It is a living equilibrium, constantly being negotiated by the forces of evolution, culture, and chance. The earth turns slowly beneath you now. The stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns, and somewhere in the quiet space between waking and sleep, the story of the right hand and the left hand continues to unfold, softly, endlessly, like water over stone. Let the words carry you now, deeper, into the dark, into the warmth, into the stillness that waits for you at the edge of sleep. The ancient tools lie quiet in their museum cases, holding their secrets about which hand shaped them. The teeth of Neanderthals, scratched and worn, remember the grip of a hand that lived and breathed and chewed and thought tens of thousands of years ago. The genes that shape our hands are still working right now in the bodies of children who have not yet been born, tilting the balance ever so slightly one way or the other. And you are drifting now, carried by the current of a story that began long before you were born and will continue long after you have fallen asleep. There is nothing to hold on to, nothing to figure out, nothing to solve, just drift. The stone napper sits by the river, shaping a tool with practiced hands. The right hand strikes, and the flake falls away, catching the light for one bright moment before settling into the mud. And somewhere, in the deep architecture of the brain, a hemisphere stirs, organizing, directing, building the world one movement at a time. And we drift deeper into the quiet, and we drift deeper into the quiet. The water moves over the stones in the riverbed, carrying nothing but itself, and the sound of it is like breathing, like the slow turning of something very old and very patient. And so we continue drifting into the next layer of the story, the layer where hands learn to speak. There is a theory, quiet and persistent, that has been growing in the minds of evolutionary biologists for some time now. It suggests that the hands did not simply become tools for gripping and striking. They became instruments of communication. They became, in a sense, the first language. Before the human voice could form words, before the larynx had descended far enough in the throat to allow the complex sounds of speech, the hands were already moving. They were pointing, they were gesturing, they were drawing attention to objects, to events, to intentions. And these early gestures, these communicative movements of the hands, may have played a significant role in shaping which hand became dominant. The idea is this: when a person reaches out to point at something, or to hand an object to another person, or to make a gesture that carries meaning, they tend to use their right hand. This is true even among young children, before cultural influences have had much time to shape their behavior. The right hand is the hand of intentional communicative action, the hand that reaches out to share something with the world. Let your breath slow. Let the rhythm of it match the rhythm of the words, in and out, softly. Why the right hand and not the left? The answer likely lies again in the brain. The left hemisphere, which controls the right hand, is the hemisphere that, in most people, handles language. And if the earliest forms of communication were gestural, if they were carried out primarily by the hands, then it would make sense for the brain to route those communicative gestures through the same hemisphere that would later come to handle spoken language. The hand and the voice, in this view, share a neural home. This is sometimes called the gestural communication theory of handedness, and it proposes that the evolution of right-handedness and the evolution of language were not separate processes but deeply intertwined ones. As our ancestors began to communicate more intentionally, more deliberately, the brain began to specialize, and that specialization pulled the right hand into the role of primary communicator and actor. But communicative gestures are only one piece of a larger puzzle. There is also the matter of goal-directed action, the broad category of behavior in which an organism reaches for something, grasps it, and does something with it. Goal-directed actions have a quality that distinguishes them from other kinds of movement. They are intentional, they are planned, they have a purpose, an end state that the organism is trying to achieve. Thump, thump. The heartbeat continues, steady and slow, like a metronome counting out the measures of a very long and quiet song. Research into the neural basis of goal-directed action has revealed something fascinating. These actions are organized hierarchically in the brain. A complex action, like reaching for a piece of fruit, grasping it, and bringing it to the mouth, is not a single movement but a sequence of smaller movements, each one nested within the larger plan. And the brain region that organizes this hierarchical structure, that holds the overall plan and coordinates the individual steps, is located primarily in the left hemisphere. This left hemispheric dominance for the organization of goal-directed action provides another possible explanation for right-handedness. If the left hemisphere is the hemisphere that plans and coordinates skilled, purposeful movements, then it makes sense that it would also be the hemisphere that most strongly controls the hand it specializes in, the right hand. The right hand, in this view, is not just the hand of communication, it is the hand of intention, the hand that carries out the plans that the left hemisphere has laid. And there is evidence from the animal world to support this idea. When chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, engage in tasks that require precise manipulation. Tasks like using a stick to extract termites from a mound or cracking open nuts with a stone tool. They show a tendency to use the right hand. This tendency is not universal among chimpanzees, and it is not as strong as the right-handed bias in humans, but it is there, and it suggests that the neural machinery for goal-directed action and its connection to right-handedness may have roots that stretch back to our common ancestor with chimpanzees, perhaps 6 or 7 million years ago. Let your fingers relax, uncurl them gently, let your hands lie open and still. The great apes as a whole, chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas and orangutans, show handedness, but the pattern is more complex than a simple right-handed majority. Different species show different tendencies, and within each species there is considerable variation among individuals. Some populations of chimpanzees show a slight rightward bias in certain tasks, while others show no significant bias at all. Gorillas and orangutans show more variable patterns, sometimes leaning slightly left, sometimes slightly right, depending on the task and the population studied. This variability stands in stark contrast to the remarkable consistency of human right-handedness. In humans, across virtually every population that has been studied, from hunter-gatherer societies to industrialized nations, from ancient civilizations to the modern world, right-handedness predominates. This universality suggests that something happened in the human lineage after our divergence from the other great apes that locked in the rightward bias more firmly than it was ever locked in among our relatives. What that something was, or rather, what combination of somethings it was, is still being debated. But the candidates are familiar by now. The evolution of language, the intensification of tool use, the pressures of combat, the demands of bipedal locomotion, and the subtle interplay of genetics and development that shapes the brain before birth. Breathe in, hold the warmth of it, and let it go. Among the questions that have occupied evolutionary biologists studying handedness is the matter of kin selection. Kin selection is a form of natural selection in which a trait is favored not because it directly benefits the individual who carries it, but because it benefits the individual's relatives, particularly close relatives who are likely to share the same genes. Could left-handedness be maintained in part through kin selection? The idea is intriguing. If a group of closely related individuals includes both right-handed and left-handed members, the left-handed members may provide a tactical advantage in combat that benefits the entire group, not just themselves. A family or a small band that includes a left-handed fighter has a weapon that opponents are not prepared for, and the success of that fighter in combat may increase the survival and reproductive success of the whole group. But the evidence for kin selection as a significant factor in the maintenance of left-handedness is mixed. Some theoretical models suggest that kin selection could contribute to the persistence of left-handedness, particularly in small, closely related groups, where combat between groups is common. Others argue that the effect would be too small to matter much, and that the more straightforward mechanism of frequency-dependent selection in individual combat is sufficient to explain the data. There is also the question of whether left-handedness is more or less common among individuals who are closely related. If kin selection were a significant factor, we might expect to see left-handedness clustering in families and kin groups, and indeed, left-handedness does show some degree of heritability. Left-handed parents are more likely to have left-handed children than right-handed parents are. But the degree of heritability is moderate, not overwhelming, and it can be explained by shared genetics without invoking kin selection. Thump, thump, like footsteps on a long, quiet road, leading somewhere warm and dark. The mathematical models that researchers have built to explore the dynamics of handedness in populations are elegant and revealing. They attempt to capture, in simplified form, the balance of forces that maintains left-handedness at its current level. The most influential of these models incorporate two key variables: the advantage that left-handed individuals enjoy in combat against right-handed opponents, and the disadvantage they suffer in cooperative activities with the right-handed majority. When these two forces are balanced, when the combat advantage is just large enough to offset the cooperative disadvantage, the model predicts a stable equilibrium, a proportion of left-handers that does not change over time. And the proportion that these models predict, when calibrated with data from real human populations, falls remarkably close to the observed rate of left-handedness, somewhere around 10%. This convergence between model and reality is one of the strongest pieces of evidence for the fighting hypothesis. It suggests that the balance between combat and cooperation is not just a plausible explanation for the persistence of left-handedness, but the most likely one. The mathematics of the situation, when laid out carefully, point toward a single stable answer. But the models also reveal something important about the sensitivity of this balance. Small changes in the relative strength of the combat advantage or the cooperative disadvantage can shift the equilibrium proportion of left-handers noticeably. If combat becomes more intense, if the stakes of fighting increase, the equilibrium proportion of left-handers rises. If cooperation becomes more important, if the rewards of working together outweigh the risks of fighting, the proportion falls. This sensitivity helps explain why the rate of left-handedness varies somewhat across cultures and historical periods, even as it remains within a relatively narrow range. Let your body melt into the mattress. Feel the warmth spreading through you, from your chest outward, toward your fingertips and toes. The question of gender differences in handedness is another thread worth following quietly into the night. Across most human populations, males are slightly more likely to be left-handed than females. The difference is not enormous. Perhaps 12% of males versus 10% of females in populations where left-handedness is not suppressed. but it is consistent enough to have attracted the attention of researchers. One explanation for this difference involves the role of hormones in prenatal development. Testosterone, the primary male reproductive hormone, is present in higher concentrations in male fetuses during the critical period when the brain is developing and lateralizing. Some researchers have proposed that elevated prenatal testosterone exposure may increase the likelihood of left-handedness by influencing the way the developing brain organizes its hemispheric specialization. This hormonal hypothesis is supported by some evidence. Studies of individuals with congenital adrenal hyperplasia, a condition that results in elevated androgen levels during prenatal development, have found slightly higher rates of left-handedness than in the general population, and birth complications which can alter the hormonal environment of the developing fetus have also been associated with slightly elevated rates of left-handedness in some studies. But the hormonal hypothesis is not universally accepted. Some researchers argue that the evidence is too weak or too inconsistent to draw firm conclusions. The relationship between prenatal hormones and handedness, if it exists, may be subtle and easily confounded by other factors. And the gender difference in left-handedness, while real, is small enough that it cannot be the whole story. Breathe slowly, each breath a little quieter than the one before. There is also the matter of competition. Males, in many species, compete more intensely with one another than females do, for mates, for territory, for status. And combat, the activity in which left-handedness confers its greatest advantage, is more common among males than among females in most human societies. If left-handedness is maintained primarily by its advantage in combat, and if males engage in combat more frequently than females, then it would make sense for left-handedness to be slightly more common among males. The higher rate of male left-handedness in this view is not a cause but a consequence, a reflection of the greater importance of combat in male life. This explanation is elegant in its simplicity, and it fits neatly with the broader framework of the fighting hypothesis. It suggests that the gender difference in handedness is not a separate phenomenon requiring its own explanation, but a natural extension of the same evolutionary logic that maintains left-handedness in the population as a whole. Thump, thump. The rhythm is so slow now, so quiet, like the turning of a great wheel somewhere deep in the earth. Now let us drift into something that has long fascinated those who study the origins of hand preference, the question of learning and experience. How much of handedness is innate, and how much is shaped by the environment? Can a person change their handedness through practice and habit? The answer, as with so many questions about human biology, is nuanced. There is a strong genetic component to handedness. The tendency toward right or left is, in large part, inherited. But this tendency is not absolute. It is more like a bias, a probabilistic nudge in one direction that can be influenced by experience and environment. Children who are discouraged from using their left hand through gentle correction, through the example of a right-handed world, through the subtle social pressure that comes from being different, may learn to use their right hand for many tasks, even if their natural tendency would have been to use the left. These individuals are sometimes called switched or forced right-handers, and they may retain some traces of their underlying left-handed tendency, a preference for the left hand in tasks that are less socially monitored, or a slightly awkward quality to their right-handed movements. On the other hand, if you will pardon the expression, truly ambidextrous individuals, those who can use both hands with roughly equal skill and ease, do exist, though they are rare. And some individuals develop a mixed handedness, using the right hand for some tasks and the left for others, without any clear overall preference. These variations suggest that handedness is not a simple binary, right or left, but a spectrum, with the majority of people clustered strongly at one end, but with a significant tail extending toward the middle and beyond. Let your thoughts drift now, like clouds moving slowly across a night sky. There is no destination, no need to arrive anywhere. The concept of functional lateralization, the idea that the brain's two hemispheres each specialize in different kinds of processing, is closely related to handedness, but it extends far beyond it. The brain does not simply divide its labor between two identical halves. Each hemisphere has its own strengths, its own tendencies, its own way of engaging with the world. The left hemisphere in most right-handed people excels at tasks that require sequential processing, logical analysis, and the manipulation of symbols, including language. It is the hemisphere that breaks the world down into parts and examines them one at a time. The right hemisphere, by contrast, is better at holistic processing, at seeing the big picture, at integrating information from multiple sources simultaneously, at tasks that require spatial reasoning and emotional sensitivity. This division of labor is not a weakness but a strength. It allows the brain to handle a wider range of tasks than either hemisphere could manage alone. And it is deeply connected to the way we experience the world. The right hemisphere's sensitivity to emotion, its alertness to threats, its ability to process complex visual and spatial information. These are capacities that have been shaped by millions of years of evolution, by the need to survive in an environment full of danger and opportunity. And handedness, once again, is one of the most visible markers of this deeper organization. The right hand's connection to the left hemisphere and the left hand's connection to the right hemisphere means that the choice of hand is not just a matter of motor preference. It is a window into the way the brain has organized itself, a small but meaningful piece of evidence about the architecture of cognition. Heavier, heavier. Feel your body sinking, not falling, but settling, like a leaf drifting down through still air. The question of whether handedness is unique to humans, whether it is something that distinguishes us from all other animals, is one that has been explored with increasing sophistication in recent decades. The answer is nuanced. Lateralization, as we have noted, is widespread in the animal kingdom, but the specific pattern of strong population-level right-handedness appears to be a distinctly human phenomenon. In most non-human animals, lateralization exists at the individual level. Each individual may show a preference for one side or the other, but it does not necessarily add up to a consistent population-level bias. A group of chimpanzees, for instance, may contain roughly equal numbers of right-preferring and left-preferring individuals with no strong overall skew. In humans, by contrast, the right-handed majority is so consistent, so universal, that it clearly reflects something more than random individual variation. It reflects a population-level adaptation, a shared pattern that has been built into the species as a whole. This population-level right-handedness is thought to be one of the consequences of the unique pressures that shape the human lineage. The combination of bipedalism, tool use, language, and social complexity that made humans what they are. It is, in a sense, a signature of humanness, written not in our faces or our upright posture, but in the quiet preference of our hands. Breathe in and out. The rhythm is so gentle now, so slow. There is a myth, persistent and stubborn, that has long circulated in popular culture about the relationship between handedness and the brain. It holds that right-handed people are left-brained, dominated by the logical, analytical left hemisphere, while left-handed people are right-brained, dominated by the creative, intuitive right hemisphere. This idea has been endlessly repeated in books, articles, and casual conversation, and it has shaped the way many people think about themselves and their minds. But the myth does not hold up to scrutiny. Research has consistently shown that both hemispheres are active and engaged in virtually all tasks, and that the idea of a single dominant hemisphere controlling personality or thinking style is an oversimplification that does not reflect the complexity of how the brain actually works. Left-handed people are not, on average, more creative than right-handed people, and right-handed people are not, on average, more logical or analytical. The myth confuses the lateralization of specific brain functions, which is real, with a broader dominance of one hemisphere over the other, which is not. What is true is that the relationship between handedness and brain organization is genuinely interesting and genuinely complex. The way the brain lateralizes its functions is connected to the same developmental processes that shape hand preference, and understanding these connections is an active and productive area of research. But the popular myth of left-brainness and right-brainness is a distortion, a simplification that loses more than it reveals. Thump, thump, like the slow drip of water into a deep, quiet pool. Another myth that has persisted in the literature on handedness, though it has been increasingly challenged in recent years, is the idea that left-handedness is a marker of perinatal brain damage. This hypothesis proposed that left-handedness in some individuals was not a normal variant, but the result of damage to the brain during birth or the period immediately surrounding it. The damage, the theory suggested, might have disrupted the normal development of right-handedness, leaving the individual with a left-handed preference as a kind of compensatory response. There is a kernel of truth buried in this idea. Birth complications, oxygen deprivation, premature birth, and other stressful events have been associated with slightly elevated rates of left-handedness in some studies, and it is possible that in a small number of cases, atypical brain development during the perinatal period may contribute to an atypical hand preference. But the idea that left-handedness is, in general, a sign of brain damage has been thoroughly debunked. The vast majority of left-handed individuals have perfectly normal brains, and left-handedness, as a population-level trait, is clearly the product of normal genetic and developmental variation, not pathology. Let your mind grow quiet now. Let the thoughts slow down, like fish settling into the mud at the bottom of a lake. The heritability of hand preference, the degree to which it is passed from parent to child through shared genetics, has been studied extensively, and the results paint a consistent picture. Left-handedness runs in families. If one of your parents is left-handed, you are more likely to be left-handed than if both of your parents are right-handed. If both of your parents are left-handed, your chances of being left-handed are even higher. But the heritability is not absolute. Two right-handed parents can have a left-handed child, and two left-handed parents can have a right-handed child. This is because handedness is influenced by many genes, each contributing a small effect, and because environmental factors, the hormonal environment of the womb, the experiences of early childhood, random developmental fluctuations also play a role. Studies of monozygotic twins, identical twins who share essentially all of their DNA, have shed light on this question. If handedness were entirely genetic, identical twins would always share the same hand preference. But they do not. Monozygotic twins show a concordance rate for handedness of roughly 80%, meaning that about 80% of the time, identical twins have the same hand preference, but about 20% of the time they do not. This discordance in identical twins is strong evidence that environmental and developmental factors, in addition to genetics, play a meaningful role in determining handedness. Breathe. Let the breath come and go without effort, without thought. The environmental influences on handedness are subtle but real. The position of the fetus in the womb, the hormonal milieu of the prenatal environment, the early experiences of the newborn, all of these can nudge the developing brain in one direction or another. And as we have seen, cultural factors can also influence the expression of handedness, if not its underlying genetic tendency. A child born with a slight left-handed bias may, in a culture that strongly discourages left-handedness, learn to use the right hand for most tasks, burying the left-handed tendency beneath a layer of learned behavior. But there is a limit to how much culture can override biology. The genetic predisposition toward right-handedness is strong enough that, in the absence of cultural pressure, It reliably produces a population in which roughly 90% of individuals favor the right hand. Culture can shift the visible ratio. It can push the reported rate of left-handedness up or down, but it cannot eliminate the underlying genetic tendency entirely. The genes will keep producing left-handed individuals generation after generation, regardless of what society thinks about it. Let your body grow heavier, warmer, sinking slowly into the dark. There is one more dimension to the story of left-handedness and its persistence that deserves quiet attention before we drift deeper into the night. It concerns the question of whether left-handedness is costly or beneficial, whether it carries a net advantage or disadvantage for the individuals who possess it. For a long time, the assumption in much of the scientific literature was that left-handedness was, on balance, slightly costly. The idea was that the disruption of the normal developmental pattern, the slight deviation from the right-handed majority, might carry small but real costs in health, cognitive function, or social integration. And some studies did find associations between left-handedness and various health conditions or developmental difficulties. But more recent and more rigorous research has largely overturned this picture. Large-scale studies, drawing on data from hundreds of thousands of individuals, have found no significant difference in overall health or life expectancy between left-handed and right-handed people. Left-handed individuals are not on average sicker or less healthy than right-handed individuals. The trait appears to be, in health terms, essentially neutral, and in certain specific domains, left-handedness confers clear advantages. In interactive sports in which two opponents face one another directly, left-handed athletes are significantly overrepresented among the elite. They win at higher rates than their numbers would predict, and they tend to rise to higher levels of competition. This advantage is not universal across all sports. It is strongest in sports that involve direct physical confrontation, where the unfamiliarity of a left-handed opponent matters most. But where it exists, it is substantial and well documented. Thump, thump, the rhythm slows, almost imperceptible now, like the turning of a very distant star. The advantage of left-handers in interactive sports is not merely a curiosity. It is one of the strongest pieces of empirical evidence for the fighting hypothesis, because it demonstrates, in a controlled and well-documented setting, exactly the mechanism that the hypothesis proposes. Left-handed athletes succeed not because they are physically stronger or more skilled in any absolute sense, but because their opponents have spent their entire careers practicing against right-handed opponents. The left-handed fighter's movements come from an unfamiliar angle, and the right-handed opponent's instinctive defenses, the ones that have been honed through thousands of hours of practice, are less effective against them. This advantage diminishes as opponents become more familiar with left-handed fighters. At the very highest levels of competition, where every fighter has faced left-handed opponents many times, the surprise factor is reduced. But even at these levels, left-handed athletes maintain a slight edge, because the fundamental asymmetry of experience, the fact that most of their opponents spent the majority of their careers facing right-handed competition, never fully disappears. Let yourself drift now. There is no edge to find, no boundary to reach, just the endless, quiet current of the story carrying you gently along. The stability of left-handedness across human populations, the fact that it has persisted at roughly the same level for as long as we can measure, is one of the most striking features of the handedness story. It tells us that the forces maintaining left-handedness have been operating for a very long time, and that they have reached a balance that is resistant to change. But stability does not mean stasis. There have been shifts, subtle and gradual, in the proportion of left-handed individuals over the course of human history. In societies where cultural suppression was strong, the visible rate of left-handedness dropped. In societies where the suppression relaxed, it rose again. And in the modern world, where attitudes toward left-handedness have become more tolerant in many cultures, the reported rate has edged upwards slightly. Not because the genetics have changed, but because more people feel free to express their natural preference. These shifts are a reminder that handedness, like so many aspects of human biology, exists at the intersection of nature and culture. The genes set the stage. The brain develops according to their instructions, with all the complexity and variability that entails, and then culture steps in, shaping how that biological tendency is expressed, how it is received, and how it is lived. Breathe in and let the breath carry you deeper, quieter, into the space between one thought and the next. The story of right-handedness is, in the end, a story about balance. The balance between the right hand and the left. The balance between genetics and environment. The balance between the individual and the group. The balance between the ancient past and the living present. It is a balance that has been maintained with remarkable precision for hundreds of thousands of years, and it continues to be maintained right now in the bodies and brains of every human being alive, in the way your hand reaches for a glass of water, in the way a child picks up a crayon for the first time, in the way a fighter raises their guard against an opponent they have never faced before. The balance holds, the story continues, and somewhere in the quiet architecture of your own brain, the two hemispheres are doing their work, dividing the labor, sharing the load, each one handling its own piece of the endless, intricate puzzle of being alive, and we drift, softly, into the deeper layers of the night, where the story does not end but simply grows quieter, and the words become like water, and the water becomes like sleep. Thump, thump, and the ancient balance holds, and the hands rest, and the night deepens, and somewhere a stone napper sets down their work and looks up at the stars and wonders, as we all wonder, what it means to be the kind of creature that reaches out, with one hand preferred above the other, into the mystery of the world, and we keep drifting through the quiet, through the dark, through the long, slow turning of the story, and we keep drifting through the quiet, through the dark, through the long, slow turning of the story. The water finds its way through the stones, moving without effort, without intention, following the path of least resistance. And so do we, in this quiet hour, following the current wherever it leads. There is something beneath the story of hands and brains and genes that we have not yet touched. Something deeper still, something that belongs not to the human world, but to the world of cells and molecules, to the very smallest architecture of life. It is the story of why bodies are asymmetric at all, and it begins not with brains, but with the way individual cells are built. Every cell in your body has an internal structure, a skeleton made not of bone but of protein filaments called microtubules that crisscross the interior of the cell in a delicate and purposeful lattice. And these microtubules are not symmetrical. They have a twist to them, a chirality, a handedness built into their very molecular structure. This chirality is not random. It is a fundamental property of the proteins that make up the microtubules, and it is shared by cells across an enormous range of living organisms. This cellular chirality is thought to be one of the deepest roots of the asymmetry we see in living bodies. It is the reason why hearts tend to sit on the left side of the chest, why the liver sits on the right, why the intestines coil in a particular direction. These large-scale asymmetries, the ones we can see with our own eyes, are built on a foundation of molecular asymmetry that exists at the level of individual cells. Let your body rest now. Feel the organs inside you, each one in its place, each one doing its quiet work. The heart beating on the left, the lungs expanding and contracting, everything in its ancient order. The placement of the visceral organs, the heart, the liver, the stomach, the spleen, follows a pattern that is remarkably consistent across human beings. The heart sits slightly to the left of the midline. The liver occupies the upper right portion of the abdomen. The stomach curves to the left. This pattern is called situs inversus when it is reversed, and it occurs in only about 1 in 10,000 people. For the vast majority of us, the organs are arranged in exactly the same way, left and right, as they have been for millions of years. This visceral asymmetry is established very early in embryonic development, through a process that involves the movement of tiny hair-like structures on the surface of cells near the embryo's midline. These structures, called cilia, beat in a coordinated pattern that creates a flow of fluid from right to left. This flow, in turn, causes signaling molecules to accumulate on the left side of the embryo, and these molecules trigger a cascade of developmental events that ultimately determine which organs end up on which side. The connection between visceral asymmetry and brain lateralization is not direct, but it is real. Both are established during early embryonic development and both are influenced by the same fundamental cellular chirality. The fact that the heart tends to sit on the left side of the chest, and the fact that language tends to be processed in the left hemisphere of the brain, are in a sense two expressions of the same deep molecular bias. They are cousins, if not siblings, in the family of biological asymmetry. Thump, thump. The heartbeat, steady on the left side, has been beating in that position for longer than the human species has existed. The role of the cytoskeleton, the internal framework of protein filaments that gives cells their shape and organizes their internal processes. In brainy symmetry is an area of active and exciting research. The cytoskeleton does not merely provide structural support, it is involved in the movement of molecules within the cell, in the division of cells during development, and in the way neurons connect to one another during the formation of neural circuits. When the cytoskeleton is disrupted, when its normal structure is altered by genetic mutations or environmental insults, the consequences can be profound. In animal models, disruption of cytoskeletal genes has been shown to alter the lateralization of the brain, sometimes reversing the normal pattern of hemispheric specialization. This suggests that the cytoskeleton is not merely a passive scaffold, but an active participant in the establishment of brain asymmetry. And the connection to handedness is clear. If the cytoskeleton plays a role in establishing the lateralization of the brain, and if brain lateralization is connected to hand preference, then the cytoskeleton is, in a sense, one of the molecular architects of handedness. It is a thread that connects the smallest structures in the cell to the largest patterns in the human body, from the twist of a protein filament to the preference of a hand. Let your muscles release, one by one, starting at the top of your head and moving slowly downward, each one letting go, each one surrendering to the quiet. The story of lateralization extends far beyond the human world. It is found in vertebrates of all kinds, in fish, in amphibians, in reptiles, in birds, and in mammals. Each of these groups shows some form of brain or behavioral asymmetry, though the specific patterns differ from one group to another. In fish, for instance, the left and right hemispheres of the brain process different kinds of information. The left hemisphere tends to handle routine, well-practiced behaviors, the familiar patterns of daily life. The right hemisphere is more alert to novel stimuli, more responsive to unexpected events. This division of labor is strikingly similar to what we see in humans, and it suggests that the fundamental logic of brain lateralization, the idea that the two hemispheres should specialize in different kinds of processing, is very old indeed. In birds, lateralization is particularly pronounced. Many bird species show a clear preference for one eye over the other when scanning for predators or searching for food. This eye preference is connected to the way the bird's brain processes visual information, with each hemisphere receiving input primarily from the eye on the opposite side of the head. and in some species the lateralization extends to vocalization, to the way birds produce and process song. These examples from across the vertebrate world suggest that lateralization is not a recent evolutionary innovation, but a deeply conserved strategy, a way of organizing the brain that has proven useful across a vast range of environments and lifestyles, and the human version of this strategy, with its strong rightward bias in hand preference, is simply the latest expression of a pattern that has been evolving for hundreds of millions of years. Breathe in the quiet, in the dark. The breath is the only sound, and even it is growing softer. In recent years, the study of handedness has been revolutionized by the availability of very large genetic databases. Studies drawing on data from hundreds of thousands of individuals, or even millions, have been able to identify genetic variants associated with handedness with a degree of precision that was previously impossible. These large-scale studies have confirmed what smaller studies had long suggested, that handedness is influenced by many genes, each contributing a small effect, and that the overall pattern is one of polygenic inheritance. One of the most significant findings from these large databases is the identification of specific genetic loci, specific locations on the chromosomes, that are consistently associated with left-handedness across different populations. Some of these loci are located in or near genes that are involved in brain development, in the formation of neural circuits, or in the cellular processes that establish the left-right axis of the embryo. Others are in regions of the genome whose function is not yet fully understood. These findings have important implications not only for our understanding of handedness, but for our understanding of brain development and neurological health more broadly. Some of the same genetic variants that influence handedness have also been found to be associated with other aspects of brain organization, with the lateralization of language, with certain patterns of connectivity between brain regions, and, in some cases, with susceptibility to neurological conditions. This suggests that the genes that shape handedness are not narrowly focused on hand preference alone, but are part of a broader genetic architecture that influences the way the brain is built and organized. Let your eyelids grow heavy, so heavy. The darkness behind them is warm and complete. The question of how handedness interacts with group dynamics, with the way individuals relate to one another within a social group, adds another layer of complexity to the story. Within a group, the presence of both right-handed and left-handed individuals creates a kind of diversity that can be both advantageous and costly, depending on the circumstances. In combat between groups, when one band of humans fights against another, the presence of left-handed fighters can provide a significant advantage. An enemy that has mostly fought against right-handed opponents will be unprepared for the movements of a left-handed fighter, and the surprise can tip the balance in favor of the group that includes left-handed members. This is a between-group effect, an advantage that accrues to the group as a whole, not just to the left-handed individual, but within a group. In the context of cooperation and coordination, the presence of left-handed individuals can create friction. Tools designed for right-handed use may be awkward for left-handed users. Coordinated activities that require two people to move in sync may be slightly disrupted when one person's movements mirror the other's. These within-group costs are real, if small, and they work against the between-group advantages of having left-handed members. The balance between these two forces, the between-group advantage in combat and the within-group cost in cooperation, is another way of arriving at the same conclusion that the mathematical models have already suggested. Left-handedness persists because its benefits in certain contexts outweigh its costs, and the proportion at which it stabilizes reflects the equilibrium between these competing pressures. Thump, thump, like the slow beat of a drum in a distant cave echoing through the millennia. There is a philosophical dimension to the question of left-handedness that has occupied some researchers, a question about whether left-handedness is, in evolutionary terms, a selfish trait or an altruistic one. A selfish trait is one that benefits the individual who carries it, even at a cost to others. An altruistic trait is one that benefits others, even at a cost to the individual. Left-handedness, in the context of combat, is primarily a selfish trait. The left-handed fighter benefits from the surprise advantage they enjoy over right-handed opponents. The cost of this advantage falls on the right-handed opponents, who are less prepared to face left-handed attacks. In this sense, left-handedness is a form of competitive advantage that serves the individual first. But in the context of group competition, when groups fight against one another, left-handedness can also be altruistic. A left-handed fighter who sacrifices some of their own cooperative fitness for the sake of providing a tactical advantage to the group is, in a sense, acting altruistically. The benefit accrues to the group, not just to the individual. Whether left-handedness is, on balance, more selfish or more altruistic depends on the relative importance of individual competition versus group competition in shaping fitness. In societies where combat between groups is common and the stakes are high, the altruistic dimension may be significant. In societies where individual competition is the primary driver of fitness, the selfish dimension dominates. The answer, as with so much in evolutionary biology, depends on the context. Let yourself sink deeper into the quiet, into the warmth, into the place where the story does not need to be followed, only felt. The correlation between handedness and footedness, the preference for one foot over the other, is another fascinating piece of the puzzle. Most right-handed people are also right-footed, and most left-handed people are also left-footed. But the correlation is not perfect. Some people are right-handed and left-footed, or left-handed and right-footed, or ambidextrous in one or both limbs. This correlation suggests that the same developmental processes that shape hand preference also influence foot preference, but that the two are not entirely determined by the same mechanisms. The brain regions that control the hands and the feet are different, and the developmental pathways that establish lateralization in each limb may diverge at some point during embryonic development. The result is a pattern that is strongly correlated across limbs, but not perfectly so. A pattern that reflects both shared and independent developmental influences. Eye dominance, the preference for one eye over the other, shows a similar pattern. Most right-handed people are also right-eye dominant, but the correlation is weaker than the hand-foot correlation. This suggests that eye dominance is influenced by some of the same developmental factors as hand preference, but also by additional factors that are specific to the visual system. Breathe in, and as you breathe out, let the last traces of wakefulness dissolve, like morning fog burning off in the sun. The way the brain allocates its attention across the two sides of space, left and right, is another area in which lateralization plays a role. In most right-handed people, the right hemisphere is more alert to stimuli on the left side of space, and the left hemisphere is more alert to stimuli on the right side. This means that right-handed people tend to be slightly more attentive to objects and events on their right side, the side toward which their dominant hand reaches. This attentional bias has implications for how right-handed individuals interact with their environment. It may influence where they look first when scanning a scene, which objects they notice first, and how they orient their bodies in relation to potential threats. And it may be connected to the broader pattern of hemispheric specialization, to the right hemisphere's role in monitoring the environment for danger, and the left hemisphere's role in handling routine, goal-directed activity. For defense, this attentional bias may have evolutionary significance. If a right-handed person is more alert to stimuli on their right side, and if their dominant hand, the hand they would use to strike or defend, is also on the right side, then the alignment between attention and action is efficient. The hand is ready where the attention is focused. This alignment between attentional bias and motor dominance may be one of the subtle advantages of having a consistent lateralization, of having the hand and the attention working together in the same direction, toward the same goal. Thump, thump. The rhythm is barely audible now, like a heartbeat heard through water, through layers of sleep. The efficiency of dividing labor between the two hemispheres of the brain is not merely a theoretical concept. It has been demonstrated in experimental settings, where researchers have shown that the brain can process certain kinds of information more quickly and accurately when each hemisphere handles the tasks it is specialized for, rather than when both hemispheres try to handle everything simultaneously. This efficiency gain from specialization is one of the reasons why lateralization has been so successful as an evolutionary strategy. A brain that divides its labor, sending routine tasks to one hemisphere and novel challenges to the other, can multitask more effectively than a brain that does not. It can simultaneously monitor the environment for threats and carry out complex goal-directed activities. It can process language and spatial information at the same time without the two processes interfering with one another. And handedness in this framework is not a bug, but a feature. It is the outward expression of an internal organization that has been optimized over millions of years of evolution for efficiency. The right hand's connection to the left hemisphere and the left hand's connection to the right hemisphere reflects a division of labor that extends from the deepest levels of brain organization all the way to the movements of the fingers. Let your hands rest, open and still, feeling the air against your skin, feeling nothing at all. This story of how routine operations and unexpected challenges are handled by different parts of the brain is one of the most elegant findings in the study of brain lateralization. The left hemisphere in most people is the hemisphere of habit, of well-practiced sequences, of familiar patterns, of actions that have been performed so many times that they have become almost automatic. It is the hemisphere that handles the predictable, the routine, the known. The right hemisphere, by contrast, is the hemisphere of novelty, of unexpected events, of new situations, of challenges that have not been encountered before. It is the hemisphere that monitors the environment for surprises, that detects threats, that responds to the unfamiliar. It is, in a sense, the hemisphere of vigilance. This division makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. In an environment full of both routine activities and potential dangers, the brain needs to be able to handle both simultaneously. By dedicating one hemisphere to each kind of processing, the brain can maintain a constant state of alert readiness, always watching for threats, while also carrying out the complex, skilled activities that are necessary for survival and reproduction. The left hemisphere can focus on foraging, on tool use, on social interaction, while the right hemisphere keeps watch for predators, and handedness is intimately connected to this division. The right hand, controlled by the left hemisphere, is the hand of skilled, purposeful action, the hand that forages, that shapes tools, that communicates. The left hand, controlled by the right hemisphere, is the hand of defense, of protection, of response to the unexpected. Each hand carries the signature of the hemisphere that controls it, and each hemisphere carries the signature of the evolutionary pressures that shaped it. Breathe deeply, slowly. The dark is complete and warm and safe. The story of hominin tool-making and its connection to hand specialization is one of the richest threads in the tapestry of handedness evolution. From the earlier stone tools, crude but purposeful, to the refined and elegant weapons and implements of later periods, the archaeological record preserves a slow and fascinating progression in the skill and sophistication with which our ancestors shaped the world around them. Toolmaking is fundamentally an activity that requires the precise coordination of two hands working together. One hand holds the object being shaped, the core stone, the piece of bone, the strip of leather. The other hand delivers the force, the strike, the scrape, the cut, and the hand that delivers the force tends to be the dominant hand, because that is the hand with greater strength, greater precision, and greater coordination. This means that the tools our ancestors made are, in a sense, records of their hand preference. The angle of the cuts, the pattern of the flakes, the way the edges were shaped, all of these carry information about which hand was doing the primary work. And when archaeologists study these tools carefully, reading the evidence with patience and skill, they can reconstruct with reasonable confidence the handedness of the people who made them. The progression from the earliest tools, the simple chopping stones of Homo habilis, to the more refined implements of later periods shows not only an increase in skill and sophistication, but also a gradual solidification of the rightward bias. The earliest tools show a weak preference for right-handed napping. Later tools show a stronger preference. And by the time we reach the Upper Paleolithic, the period when modern humans were producing some of the most remarkable stone tools ever made, the right-handed bias is unmistakable. Thump, thump, the rhythm of the story itself carrying you forward and downward at the same time. The implications of what we have learned about handedness extend far beyond the question of which hand we prefer to use. They touch on some of the deepest questions about human evolution, about the nature of the brain, and about what it means to be the kind of creature we are. Handedness, polymorphism, the coexistence of right-handed and left-handed individuals in a population is itself a phenomenon of evolutionary significance. It tells us that natural selection has not driven handedness to fixation, has not eliminated one variant in favor of the other. Instead, it has maintained a balance, a dynamic equilibrium in which both variants persist. This kind of polymorphism is a hallmark of balancing selection, of evolutionary forces that favor the maintenance of diversity rather than the elimination of it. The dynamics of this polymorphism, the way the proportion of left-handers changes over time, in response to changes in the social environment, in the intensity of competition, in the degree of cultural suppression, are a window into the ongoing negotiation between nature and culture that shapes so much of human life. Handedness is not fixed, it is not set in stone, it is a living pattern, constantly being adjusted by the forces that act upon it. Let the words become less distinct now, less separate, blending together like colours in a watercolour painting left in the rain. And so we come at last to the place where the threads of the story begin to weave themselves back together, where the many strands we have followed through the night begin to converge into a single, quiet understanding. The human right hand did not simply appear. It emerged slowly and inexorably from a web of pressures and processes that stretched back millions of years, from the chirality of molecules in the earliest cells, from the way the embryo established its left-right axis before it had a brain, from the way the brain divided its labor between two hemispheres, each one taking on its own set of tasks, from the way our ancestors learned to make tools, shaping stone with practiced hands, from the way they fought one another, and the way the rare left-handed fighter gained an edge through surprise, from the way they spoke to one another and the way language pulled the right hand into the role of primary communicator. Each of these threads contributed something. Each one nudged the balance a little further toward the right, and together, over a span of time so vast that it dwarfs the entire history of human civilization, they produced the pattern we see today. A species in which 9 out of every 10 individuals prefer the right hand, and in which the remaining one, the quiet, persistent left-hander, carries an ancient advantage that keeps the balance from tipping all the way. It is a story about balance, about the delicate negotiation between advantage and cost, between individual and group, between nature and culture. It is a story that is still being told right now in the bodies and brains of every human being alive, and it will continue to be told long after this night has passed as the species continues to evolve, to adapt, to change. Breathe one last time, deeply, and let the breath carry you down into the place where stories dissolve and sleep begins. The ancient hominin sets down the stone tool and looks at their hands, one slightly stronger, slightly more practiced than the other. The right hand, the hand of action, rests against the warm stone of the fire pit. The left hand curls loosely at the side, quieter, less often called upon but no less real. Both hands belong to the same body. Both hands are part of the same story. And somewhere, far in the future, a child reaches out for the first time, not consciously, not deliberately, but with the quiet instinct of a body that has been shaped by millions of years of evolution, and the hand that reaches is, more likely than not, the right hand. The ancient pattern repeats. The balance holds. Thump, thump. The heartbeat of the species, slow and steady, beating out the rhythm of a story that has no ending. The stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns. The earth turns beneath you, carrying you gently through the dark. And somewhere, in the quiet architecture of your brain, the two hemispheres are doing their work. The left hemisphere handling the routine, the right hemisphere watching for the unexpected, each one playing its part in the endless, intricate symphony of being alive. You're drifting now, deeper than you have drifted before, into the place where the words are just warmth, and the warmth is just sleep, and the sleep is just the quiet turning of the world. The mystery of the right hand is not solved. It is understood, partially, imperfectly, with gaps and uncertainties still remaining. But the shape of the story is clear enough to marvel at. It is a story about how a single, subtle bias, a slight lean to the right, became one of the most consistent and universal features of the human species, and it is a story that connects the smallest structures in the cell to the largest patterns in human behavior, from the twist of a microtubule to the grip of a hand on a stone tool, from the chirality of a molecule to the outcome of a fight. Let the mystery remain. Let it hover, unresolved, like a question asked in a dream. There is no need to answer it tonight. There is only the drifting and the quiet and the dark. The universe keeps turning. how humans became mostly right-handed enigmas unraveling, and will keep drifting, floating together through the mysteries, looping softly, endlessly through the night. Tonight we'll drift through the violent prehistoric battles that favored right-hand dominance, the genetic twist in brain development that tilt us rightward, and the rare advantages that keep left-handers in the evolutionary game. There's nothing you need to do now. Just let your body sink, heavier, heavier. Feel the mattress holding you, every muscle softening, your heartbeat slowing, thump, thump, matching the rhythm of space itself, shoulders melting down, jaw releasing, each breath pulling you deeper, deeper into the calm, the quiet, the dark. And we'll keep drifting, floating together through the right-handed mysteries, looping softly, endlessly through the night, through the night, through the night, drifting, drift,